They laughed the moment she stepped into the gym. Too small, too quiet, too easy to dismiss. Every whisper cut deep. Every stare reminded her she didn't belong. Fear followed her through every drill. The fear of failing. The fear of being sent home. The fear that maybe they were right. Then everything changed. Without warning, without mercy. 4 opponents stepped forward, and the room held its breath. What happened next erased every doubt. Laughter died. Confidence shattered. Silence fell like a storm. And in that silence, something incredible happened. She didn't just survive. She proved that true strength doesn't announce itself. It waits, and then it rises. The laughter didn't explode. It crept. Low, scattered, careless. Like the sound of people who didn't think they were being cruel. Avery Lynn heard it the moment she stepped inside the Red Canyon training gym. The doors slammed shut behind her, metal echoing against concrete. Inside, 40 recruits were already lined along the mat, boots straight, hands clasped behind their backs. The air smelled like sweat, rubber flooring, and old disinfectant. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. And then there was her, smallest in the room, lightest frame, quiet. Someone near the back leaned toward his neighbor and muttered, "She lost or something?" Another voice followed. "No way she's here for hand-to-hand." Avery didn't react. She walked to the end of the line, placed her feet shoulder-width apart, and stared straight ahead. Her posture was calm, controlled, almost too controlled. Staff Sergeant Naomi Cross paced slowly in front of them, her boots striking the floor with sharp, deliberate rhythm. Cross had the kind of presence that drained the room of oxygen. Sharp eyes, clipped movements, and a voice that never needed to be loud to be feared. "Today," Cross said, "you'll be evaluated on close combat fundamentals. Awareness, control, adaptability." Her gaze swept across the line, then stopped. It lingered on Avery for just a fraction of a second longer than the rest. Not judgment. Assessment. Cross continued. "Some of you think strength wins fights. Some of you think speed does. You're all wrong." A few recruits smirked. Avery didn't. Jason Miller stood 3 spots to her left, 6'2", former college athlete, broad shoulders that stretched the seams of his training shirt. He glanced sideways at Avery, then back ahead, suppressing a grin. "Hey," he whispered just loud enough to be heard. "You sure you're in the right place?" Avery kept her eyes forward. Miller tried again. "This isn't a yoga class." A few chuckles followed. Cross's voice cut through the noise. "If you're talking, you're not listening. And if you're not listening, you're already losing." Silence snapped back into place. The recruits were paired off for warm-up drills. Avery was assigned to someone nearly twice her size. The man hesitated, unsure how to stand across from her without looking ridiculous. "Go easy," someone whispered behind them. The drill began. Avery moved slowly, too slowly. Her steps were cautious, her guard slightly low. When her partner advanced, she retreated instead of countering. She allowed herself to be guided backward, off balance just enough to look uncertain. A few heads shook. Cross watched. The drill ended. Avery's partner looked relieved, almost proud of himself. "See?" someone muttered. "Told you." The nickname started that afternoon. Not shouted, not announced, just passed along in murmurs. Glass. Because she looked fragile, because they assumed she would break. Avery heard it all. She always did. By the end of the session, sweat soaked through her shirt, but her breathing never broke rhythm. She stood quietly while others bent over, hands on knees, gasping, No one noticed. That night, the barracks were restless. Metal bunks creaked. Someone cursed softly in the dark. Another recruit whispered into his pillow, fighting homesickness. Avery lay on her back, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. She didn't think about the laughter. She thought about timing. Back home, her aunt used to say, "If people underestimate you, let them. That's not an insult. That's an opening." Avery had learned early that strength announced itself loudly. Real skill stayed quiet. She had no interest in proving anything yet. The second week passed much like the first. Avery finished near the bottom in runs. She struggled through obstacle drills. During controlled sparring, she disengaged early, never reckless, never impressive. The jokes grew bolder. Miller started betting coffee that she wouldn't last the month. Others joined in. "She's dragging the whole platoon down. She won't survive the next evaluation." Avery heard all of it. She said nothing. What they didn't see were the small things, how she never blinked during confrontation, how she adjusted her stance without thinking, how she watched people, not their hands, not their feet, but their breathing. Staff Sergeant Cross noticed. During a break, Cross stood near the edge of the mat, arms crossed. Her eyes followed Avery as she wiped her hands on her pants and stepped back into formation. Cross had trained hundreds of recruits. Weak ones quit loudly. Strong ones showed off. Avery did neither. That night, after lights out, Avery slipped quietly into the empty laundry room. No mirrors, no audience. She stood still for a long moment. Then she moved. Not fast, not hard, precise. Her feet traced clean arcs against the floor. Her hands cut the air in short, efficient lines. Every motion flowed into the next, balanced and deliberate, like a language she had spoken her entire life. She stopped before breaking a sweat, returned to her bunk, and lay down as if nothing had happened. Tomorrow they would laugh again, and Avery would let them. For now. By the third week, everyone thought they had Avery Lynn figured out. She was polite, she was quiet, and she was clearly out of her depth. That was the story the platoon told itself, and once a story took hold, no one bothered to question it. Morning runs were the worst. The desert air at Red Canyon was dry and sharp, scraping the lungs raw before the sun even cleared the ridge. Recruits ran in formation, boots pounding against the gravel path, breath turning ragged as the pace increased. Avery always fell behind. Not dramatically. Not enough to be pulled aside, just enough. She shortened her stride by inches, let her arms swing a little wider than necessary. When the burn crept into her legs, she let it show on her face. Just a flicker of strain, just enough to confirm what everyone already believed. Jason Miller glanced back over his shoulder mid-run and smirked. "Clock's ticking, Glass," he muttered. Avery didn't respond. She adjusted her breathing instead. Slow in through the nose, steady out through the mouth, keeping her heart rate far lower than anyone would guess. At the finish line, several recruits collapsed onto the ground, chests heaving. Avery bent forward too, hands on her knees, mimicking exhaustion. Staff Sergeant Naomi Cross watched from a distance. Too perfect, Cross thought, too controlled. Later that morning came controlled combat drills. Pairs rotated through the mat, practicing takedown defenses and positional awareness. The emphasis wasn't power, it was reaction. Decision-making under pressure. Avery's turn came. Her opponent rushed in aggressively, trying to overwhelm her with size and speed. Avery retreated, allowing him to drive her backward. She misstepped once. Let her balance break just enough to look accidental. The drill ended with Avery pinned but unharmed. Her opponent grinned, satisfied. "Lucky break," someone said. "She almost tripped herself." Laughter rippled through the room. Cross's eyes never left Avery. After dismissal, Miller and two others lingered near the water station, voices low but not subtle. "She's not cut out for this," Miller said. "You can tell. No instinct." "No fire," another added. "Won't make it past the next evaluation." Avery filled her canteen and walked past them without looking up. What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Avery had ended that drill exactly where she wanted to be. Pinned. Still. Safe. She had measured her opponent's reach, his breathing pattern, the moment his weight shifted forward. If she had chosen to, she could have reversed the position in less than a second. She chose not to. That afternoon, Staff Sergeant Cross called her over. Not loudly, not officially. "Lynn," Cross said, arms folded. "Walk with me." They moved along the edge of the training field, boots crunching over dry dirt. For a long moment, Cross said nothing. "Do you know why most recruits fail here?" Cross finally asked. Avery kept her gaze forward. "Lack of endurance, ma'am." "That's what they think," Cross replied. "But it's not the body that quits first. It's pride." Avery nodded once. Cross stopped walking. Avery stopped too. "You're finishing last on purpose," Cross said. It wasn't an accusation. It was an observation. Avery met her eyes. Calm. Neutral. "I'm completing all required drills, ma'am." Cross studied her face, searching for cracks. She found none. "Be careful," Cross said quietly. "When people decide you're weak, they stop treating you like a teammate." "I understand, ma'am." Cross held her gaze another second longer, then stepped back. "Dismissed." As Avery walked away, Cross felt a chill. Not fear, not concern, recognition. That evening, the platoon gathered in the barracks common area. Conversations overlapped, loud and restless. Someone replayed the day's drills with exaggerated commentary. "Did you see glass get folded today?" "Man, that was rough," Miller laughed. "She's not glass. Glass breaks easy. She's decoration." More laughter. Avery sat on her bunk, lacing her boots slowly. Her hands were steady. She had heard worse. Much worse. Later, after lights out, when the barracks fell into uneasy silence, Avery slipped out again. The training gym was locked, but the auxiliary room behind it wasn't. She stepped inside, closed the door, and stood still. For 30 seconds, she did nothing. Then she moved. Her footwork was sharp now. No wasted motion. She pivoted, shifted, and flowed through a series of movements that never appeared in official drills. Each step placed her exactly where an unseen opponent would be weakest. She practiced distance control, angle changes, entries and exits. Not fast, efficient. Avery stopped, breathing steady, pulse barely elevated. She imagined 4 silhouettes around her, different sizes, different rhythms, different mistakes. She mapped them in her mind, one by one. Then she stepped back, wiped her hands on her pants, and returned to her bunk. The next morning, the announcement came. "End of cycle evaluation," Cross said during formation. "Full participation required." A murmur rippled through the line. Avery felt it. Not fear, not excitement. Readiness. Miller cracked his neck beside her. "Hope you're ready, Glass." Avery kept her eyes forward. She was more than ready. She just wasn't done waiting. Avery Lynn learned early that real training never looked impressive. There were no mirrors where she grew up. No cheering crowds. No belts to collect or trophies to polish. What she learned came quietly, in small rooms and empty spaces, passed down through repetition and correction, rather than praise. Back then, she didn't even call it martial arts. It was just survival with rules. Her aunt used to wake her before dawn, when the city outside was still half asleep. The floor would be cold beneath Avery's bare feet, the air heavy with silence. Balance first, her aunt would say. Power comes later. They never started with strikes. They started with standing. Avery would stand in place for minutes at a time, knees bent just enough to burn, back straight, shoulders loose. If she shifted her weight wrong, her aunt would tap her ankle lightly with 2 fingers. Again. If her breathing became uneven, again. There was no anger in it, no urgency, just expectation. As Avery grew older, the lessons changed. Movement replaced stillness. Angles replaced strength. She learned how distance mattered more than speed, how timing mattered more than force. Her aunt had one rule she repeated more than any other. Never show everything you know. Avery hadn't understood at first. Why? She once asked. Her aunt didn't answer right away. She waited until Avery had finished the drill, until her breathing returned to normal. Because people prepare for what they see, she finally said. They don't prepare for what they don't. That lesson stayed with Avery longer than any technique. At Red Canyon, those lessons whispered back to her every day. During drills, she watched others show off. Recruits threw wide punches, exaggerated takedowns, dramatic recoveries. Some moved well, some moved recklessly. Most of them moved loudly. Avery moved quietly. She noticed patterns others missed. The way Miller leaned forward before committing to a strike. The way one recruit always stepped left under pressure. The way another froze for half a second when his rhythm was disrupted. Every movement was information, and Avery collected information patiently. During one afternoon session, Staff Sergeant Cross demonstrated a standard defensive maneuver. Clean, efficient, textbook. The recruits repeated it in pairs. Avery mirrored the movement perfectly, too perfectly. Cross stopped mid-walk. Lynn, she said, again. Avery repeated it, this time with a fraction less precision. Cross narrowed her eyes. Better, she said. Don't overthink it. Avery nodded and stepped back. Cross turned away, but the seed of suspicion had already rooted deeper. That night, Avery dreamed of the mat. Not the gym mat, the imaginary one. 4 opponents stood around her, spaced unevenly. She didn't rush. She never rushed in dreams. She adjusted her stance, letting each one commit first. They always did. She woke before dawn, heart calm, mind clear. The day of the evaluation drew closer. The energy in the platoon shifted. Conversations grew sharper. Jokes carried an edge of nervousness now. Everyone knew the evaluation would reshape the hierarchy. Miller grew louder. You ready to finally see who belongs here? He said one afternoon, stretching theatrically. Avery tightened her bootlaces. I've been ready, she said. Miller laughed. That's the spirit. He had no idea how true that was. Later that day, Cross called the platoon together. End-of-cycle evaluation will involve continuous engagement, she announced. No scripted pairings, no reset after every exchange. A low murmur passed through the group. Avery felt something shift inside her. Not adrenaline, not fear. Alignment. That evening, she stayed in the barracks. No secret practice, no shadow drills. She sat on her bunk and wrote. Not notes, not plans, rules. Keep breathing steady. Control the center. End it before it becomes chaos. She folded the paper and tucked it into her locker. Across the room, Miller and a few others were talking animatedly, replaying imagined victories. Avery listened without reacting. Her aunt's voice echoed in her memory. "People think fighting is about dominance," she had said. "It's not. It's about resolution. Resolve the situation. Resolve the threat. Resolve yourself." Avery lay back on her bunk and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow, she wouldn't be able to hide everything anymore. And she wouldn't. She would still hold back, but not enough to be invisible. The gym felt smaller that morning, not because the walls had moved, but because everyone inside seemed to be watching everyone else a little too closely. Evaluation day. The mats had been cleaned until they shone under the lights. Clipboards rested against the wall. A digital timer glowed red above the entrance, its numbers frozen at 0. No music. No warm-up chatter. Just boots, breath, and tension. Avery Lynn stood in formation near the end of the line, hands clasped behind her back. She felt the weight of the room without turning her head. She didn't need to look to know where the attention was. Jason Miller paced near the front, rolling his shoulders, bouncing lightly on the balls of his feet, like he was already warming up for a victory lap. "This is it," he said loudly to no one in particular. "Time to see who's real." A few recruits nodded, a few laughed, others said nothing, staring straight ahead, locked inside their own nerves. Staff Sergeant Naomi Cross stepped onto the mat. Her presence snapped the room into focus. "Listen carefully," she said. "Today is not about winning. It's about control." She let that word hang. Control of your body, control of the situation, control of yourselves. Her eyes moved across the formation and stopped on Avery. "For some of you," Cross continued, "this will be uncomfortable." Avery didn't move. Cross gestured toward the timer. "Continuous engagement. You will not know who comes next. You will not reset between exchanges. Adapt or fail." A murmur rippled through the room. Continuous engagement meant fatigue. It meant mistakes. It meant exposure. Miller's grin widened. "Pairs will be assigned at random," Cross said. "When I call your name, you step onto the mat. When I call the next name, you stay where you are." The first few rounds passed quickly. Strong recruits pushed hard early, eager to make statements. Some burned too much energy too fast. Others hesitated, overwhelmed by the uncertainty. Avery watched everything. She noted who rushed, who froze, who breathed too shallow. Then her name was called. Lynn. A few heads turned. Someone exhaled sharply, amused. Avery stepped onto the mat. Her first opponent approached cautiously. He was solid, confident, but not reckless. The exchange was brief and controlled. Avery retreated when she needed to, redirected when she could, and disengaged cleanly when Cross called time. Nothing remarkable. Exactly as planned. The second opponent came in hotter, more aggressive. Avery adjusted her stance, absorbed pressure, and let the momentum pass. A few people groaned. "Same old," someone whispered. Cross watched without blinking. The third name was called Miller. The air shifted. Miller stepped forward with a grin that bordered on theatrical. He glanced at Avery and shook his head lightly, as if apologizing in advance. "Nothing personal," he said under his breath. "Just business." Avery met his eyes. "Understood," she replied. The timer beeped. Miller advanced confidently, controlling the center of the mat. Avery gave ground, not in panic, not in haste, measured. Miller pushed harder, testing her balance, crowding her space. Avery allowed herself to be guided backward again, letting her heels slide just a fraction too far. A ripple of reaction passed through the room. Miller smiled, and then something changed. Not visibly, not dramatically, but Avery stopped retreating. For half a second, she held her ground. Miller hesitated. It was small, so small most people missed it, but Staff Sergeant Cross did not. Avery shifted her angle just enough to break Miller's alignment. He corrected, too late, and overcommitted to regain position. Cross called time. The room exhaled. Miller frowned, unsettled. "What was that?" he muttered. Avery stepped back into place without answering. Cross looked from Miller to Avery, then down at her clipboard. "Next," she said. Avery stayed on the mat. So did the pressure. The next opponent was leaner, faster. He circled, trying to bait her into reacting first. Avery stayed patient, forcing him to move more than he wanted. Time was called again. Still nothing spectacular. But now the room was quiet, not bored, watching. Miller wiped sweat from his forehead, eyes narrowing as he tracked Avery's breathing. She wasn't tired. That didn't make sense. Cross raised a hand. "We'll pause here," she said. "Short break." Groans followed. People bent forward, stretching, shaking out arms. Avery stayed standing. Cross approached her. Low voice. No audience. "You don't have much room left," Cross said. "I know, ma'am." "Next round," Cross continued. "They won't be testing you. They'll be testing themselves." Avery nodded. Across the room, Miller watched them talk. Something in his expression hardened. When the break ended, Cross didn't bother hiding it anymore. "Lynn," she said, "you're staying." A few surprised looks, a few protests. Cross ignored them. 4 consecutive engagements." The room stiffened. This wasn't standard. Miller's eyes widened. 4? Cross turned to him. "Problem?" "No, ma'am," he said quickly. "Just surprised." Avery stepped back to the center of the mat. Her pulse quickened, not from fear, but from inevitability. The room felt tight now. Every sound magnified, every movement noticed. Cross glanced at the timer. "Ready?" she asked. Avery inhaled slowly. "Yes, ma'am." The timer beeped, and for the first time since she arrived at Red Canyon, Avery Lynn stopped holding back. Not fully, but enough. The timer beeped. The sound cut through the gym like a blade. Avery Lynn stood at the center of the mat, shoulders relaxed, hands open, not raised, not clenched. She didn't look like someone about to fight. She looked like someone waiting for a door to open. Her first opponent stepped forward. He was built for strength, broad chest, heavy stance. The kind of recruit who relied on pressure. Move forward, force mistakes, overwhelm. The room leaned in. He advanced quickly, trying to crowd her space, expecting her to retreat the way she always had. She didn't. For the first time, Avery held her ground. The change was subtle but immediate. His rhythm faltered. He adjusted mid-step, committing more weight than he meant to. That was all she needed. Avery shifted her angle just a few inches and redirected his momentum instead of resisting it. There was no collision, no explosion of force. He simply found himself off balance, guided downward by a calm, deliberate motion. Control. The exchange ended before confusion turned into panic. Cross's voice cut in. "Clear." A murmur rippled through the gym. The first opponent stepped away, stunned, not hurt, but unmistakably aware that something had gone wrong. Avery remained where she was, second opponent. This one was faster, lighter on his feet. He circled, testing distance, trying to bait her into reacting too soon. Avery let him. She tracked his movement with her eyes, not her head. She watched his breathing quicken as he moved, the subtle tension in his shoulders when he prepared to engage. He lunged. Avery didn't step back. She stepped through the space he left open. Her timing was precise, so precise it felt like she had moved before he decided to act. She disrupted his balance with a controlled intercept, redirecting his energy and guiding him safely to the mat. The gym went quiet. Not silent. Quiet. The second opponent sat up slowly, blinking, trying to understand how he had ended up there. Cross didn't look surprised. She looked focused. "Stay ready," she said. Third opponent. This one hesitated. He had watched the first two exchanges. He no longer smiled. He no longer rushed. He approached cautiously, trying to slow the pace, trying to force Avery to make the first move. Avery waited. The silence stretched. Every breath sounded loud. Then he stepped in. Avery responded, not with speed, but with placement. She guided his movement, controlled the center, and closed the exchange cleanly, decisively, without unnecessary force. 3. The room felt different now. No whispers, no laughter, just eyes. Jason Miller stood at the edge of the mat, jaw tight, confidence draining with every second that passed. Cross turned toward him. "Miller," she said. He stepped forward. This time there was no grin. Miller took his stance carefully, shoulders squared, eyes locked on Avery. He had size, he had reach, and now he had caution. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Avery nodded once. The timer beeped again. Miller advanced slowly, testing her reactions. He feinted, shifted angles, tried to draw out the retreat he was used to seeing. It didn't come. Avery met him at the center. For the first time, Miller realized something was wrong. She wasn't reacting to him. She was anticipating him. He committed to a controlled push, trying to assert dominance, trying to reclaim the rhythm. Avery adjusted her stance, disrupted his alignment, and guided the exchange exactly where she wanted it. Miller resisted. Avery adapted. The moment stretched. Not long, but long enough for everyone watching to understand this wasn't luck. This was skill. The exchange ended with Miller stepping back, breathing harder than he expected to be, eyes wide with realization. Cross raised her hand. Enough. The timer stopped. The gym went silent. Not awkward silence, not shocked gasps, complete silence. 4 consecutive engagements, 4 clean outcomes. Avery stood alone at the center of the mat, breathing steady, posture unchanged. She hadn't celebrated. She hadn't looked at the crowd. She simply waited. Cross stepped forward. Her voice was calm, but it carried. Training complete. No one moved. Miller swallowed hard. He looked at Avery, then away. "Were you holding back?" he asked quietly. Avery considered the question. "Yes," she said. The word landed heavier than any strike. Cross closed her clipboard. "Return to formation," she ordered. Avery stepped off the mat. As she walked back to her place, the eyes followed her. Not with mockery, not with doubt, with respect, and something else. Understanding. Silence followed Avery Lynn out of the gym. Not the awkward kind. Not the kind that begged to be filled. This was heavier. Boots lined up again on the concrete floor. Hands returned behind backs. The formation looked the same as it always had, but something fundamental had shifted underneath it. People didn't look at Avery the same way anymore. They didn't look away, either. Staff Sergeant Naomi Cross dismissed the platoon with a sharp command, and the recruits broke formation slowly, like they weren't entirely sure where to go next. Avery walked back toward the barracks alone. She didn't rush. She didn't linger. Her breathing was steady, the same rhythm she'd kept during the 4 engagements. The adrenaline had faded quickly. What remained was clarity. Behind her, conversations started again, but carefully. That wasn't luck. I've never seen anything like that. She wasn't trying to win. She was controlling it. Avery didn't turn around. By the time she reached the barracks, the hallway fell quiet. Conversations died mid-sentence as she passed. She could feel eyes on her back, measuring, recalibrating. She sat on her bunk and began unlacing her boots. Jason Miller stood across the room, staring at the floor like it had personally betrayed him. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Miller stepped forward. He stopped a few feet from Avery's bunk, hands open at his sides. No swagger, no grin. "I owe you something," he said. Avery looked up. "I spent weeks thinking you didn't belong here," Miller continued. "I talked like I knew better, like size meant something." A few recruits shifted uncomfortably. "I was wrong," he said. "Completely wrong." The room stayed silent. Avery considered him, not with judgment, not with triumph, with assessment. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "That's enough." Miller blinked. "That's it?" "That's it," Avery replied. "You learned, so did I." Miller nodded slowly and stepped back. Something in the room loosened. One by one, others approached. Not all at once, not dramatically. Quiet questions, careful respect. "How long have you trained? What was that timing you used? Can you show me how you stayed balanced like that?" Avery answered selectively. She didn't reveal everything. She never had. But she explained principles, distance, patience, control. She didn't teach techniques. She taught understanding. That night, Staff Sergeant Cross called Avery into her office. No clipboard this time, no formal posture. Cross leaned against the desk, arms crossed loosely. "You knew this would change things," Cross said. "Yes, ma'am." "Anything you want to say?" Avery thought for a moment. "I didn't want to embarrass anyone." Cross studied her. "You didn't. They embarrassed themselves by underestimating you." Avery nodded. "You could have shown that earlier," Cross continued. "You chose not to." "Yes, ma'am." "Why?" Avery met her eyes. "Because skill revealed too early becomes a target." Cross exhaled through her nose. A small smile touched the corner of her mouth. "Smart," she said. "Dangerous, but smart." She straightened. "You're on my radar now, Lynn. Not because of what you did today, but because of when you chose to do it." Avery understood. The next morning felt different. During physical training, Avery ran in the middle of the pack. Not last, not first. No one mocked her pace. No one bet against her anymore. Miller fell into step beside her. "You're breathing," he said quietly. "You never lose it." Avery kept her eyes forward. "Breathing is the first thing people give up." "What's the second?" "Patience." He nodded, absorbing it. Later, during drills, Cross assigned Avery to lead a small group through coordination exercises. The room watched carefully. Avery didn't raise her voice. She didn't posture. She adjusted positions, made small corrections, gave clear, calm instructions. The group moved better with her than without her. That didn't go unnoticed. At lunch, Avery sat with the same tray she always carried, the same seat. Only now there were others beside her. No jokes, no teasing, just quiet respect. That afternoon, an announcement came over the intercom. "Lynn, report to administrative offices at 1700. Murmurs followed. Avery finished her drill and wiped her hands calmly. Cross caught her eye from across the room. "Here it comes," Cross's look said. At 1700, Avery stood outside the administrative office, posture straight, expression neutral. The door opened. "Recruit Lynn," a voice called. "Come in." Avery stepped forward. She didn't know what waited on the other side of that door, but she knew one thing for certain. She would never be underestimated again. The door closed with a soft click. It wasn't loud. It didn't echo. But the sound felt final. Avery Lynn stood alone in the administrative office, hands at her sides, posture precise. The room smelled faintly of paper and old coffee. A single window overlooked the training grounds, where recruits moved in tight formations below. Behind the desk sat Colonel Mark Ellison. He didn't stand when she entered. He didn't smile either. "Recruit Lynn," he said, "at ease." Avery shifted, just slightly. Not relaxed. Ready. Ellison studied her for a long moment without speaking. He didn't look like a man impressed easily. His eyes moved the way experienced commanders' eyes did. Slow, deliberate, weighing more than appearances. "I watched the evaluation footage," he said finally. "Yes, sir." More than once. Avery didn't react. Ellison leaned back in his chair. Most people see physical outcomes and assume physical causes. Strength, speed, aggression. He tapped a pen lightly against the desk. "That's not what I saw." Avery waited. "I saw restraint," Ellison continued. "I saw patience. I saw someone who understood when to act." He looked up at her. "That's rarer than talent." Avery met his gaze. "My training emphasized control, sir." "From where?" Avery hesitated, just long enough to choose her words. "From family," she said. "And experience?" Ellison nodded once. "You spent weeks allowing others to underestimate you." "Yes, sir." "Why?" Avery inhaled slowly. "Because attention is a liability before it becomes an asset." Ellison's pen stopped moving. "That answer," he said quietly, "is exactly why you're here." He opened a folder on his desk. Avery recognized her name on the tab. "Your instructors flagged you after the evaluation," Ellison said. "Not for what you did, but for how you did it." He slid the folder slightly toward her. She didn't touch it. "There are paths in this organization," he continued, "that aren't advertised. Roles that require more than compliance and endurance." He paused. "They require judgment." Avery remained still. "I'm not offering you anything today," Ellison said. "This isn't a reward." He leaned forward. "It's an invitation." "To what, sir?" Ellison stood and walked toward the window. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the yard. "There's an advanced assessment program," he said. "Small, selective. It tests decision-making under pressure more than physical dominance." He turned back to her. "Very few recruits are even considered." Avery's pulse quickened, but only slightly. "Your participation would be provisional," Ellison added. "No guarantees, no exceptions." "I understand, sir." Ellison studied her again. "Do you want it?" Avery didn't answer immediately. She thought of the mat, the silence, the eyes watching. "Yes, sir," she said. "If I qualify?" Ellison nodded. "That's the right answer." He closed the folder. "For now, return to your unit. Say nothing about this conversation." "Yes, sir." As Avery turned to leave, Ellison spoke again. "One more thing." She stopped. "People will test you now," he said. "Not because they doubt you, but because they fear what you represent." Avery faced him. "I expected that, sir." Ellison's expression softened, just a fraction. "Good." he said. Then you'll be ready. The door closed behind her again. Outside, the hallway felt louder, brighter, different. Word traveled fast. By evening chow, people from other units were glancing her way, some with curiosity, some with guarded respect. Jason Miller leaned over his tray. Administrative office? He asked quietly. Yes. He nodded. That's not nothing. Avery didn't elaborate. That night she sat on her bunk, polishing her boots with slow, even strokes. Around her, conversations rose and fell, no longer centered on mockery. Cross stopped near her bed. Colonel Ellison, Cross said. Avery looked up. Yes, ma'am. Cross studied her for a moment. Whatever he said, remember who you are before they noticed. Avery nodded. I will. Cross hesitated. And Lynn? Yes, ma'am? Don't lose the quiet, Cross said. It's your advantage. Later, long after lights out, Avery lay awake listening to the familiar sounds of the barracks, breathing, movement, life. She thought about the door closing behind her, about what waited beyond the path she already knew. Her aunt's voice returned, steady and clear. Skill opens doors. Character decides what happens after. Avery closed her eyes. Tomorrow she would train like everyone else. But her direction had changed, and there was no going back. Graduation morning arrived without ceremony. No thunder, no dramatic announcement. Just sunlight spilling across the training grounds, as if nothing extraordinary had happened there at all. Avery Lynn stood in formation with the rest of her platoon, boots aligned, shoulders squared. She wore the same uniform as everyone else. No markings set her apart. No sign hinted at the quiet shift that had already taken place. But the way people stood near her had changed. They gave her space, not distance, not avoidance. Respect. Jason Miller stood 2 places to her right. He caught her eye briefly and nodded. Not exaggerated, not awkward, just acknowledgement. Staff Sergeant Naomi Cross paced in front of them one final time. Her gaze passed over the platoon, pausing briefly on Avery, long enough to communicate something without words. You made it, and you didn't lose yourself doing it. The ceremony was efficient. Names were called, steps taken forward, salutes exchanged. When Avery's name was spoken, it didn't draw cheers or whispers. It drew silence, the kind that listens. She stepped forward, received her insignia, and returned to formation without expression. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing didn't change. This wasn't the moment she had been waiting for. It was simply the result of waiting well. After dismissal, families gathered at the edge of the grounds. Laughter rose. Photos were taken. Pride spilled freely. Avery stood off to the side, watching. She felt Cross approach before she heard her. You did exactly what you needed to do, Cross said quietly. I had good guidance, Avery replied. Cross shook her head. Guidance only matters if someone listens. She hesitated, then added, Ellison submitted his recommendation. Avery nodded. Thank you, ma'am. You don't owe me thanks, Cross said. Just don't waste what comes next. Later, as the crowd thinned, Avery walked alone toward the far end of the grounds, where the noise faded into wind and distant ocean air. She sat on a low concrete barrier and let the morning settle. Weeks ago, she had arrived here invisible. She hadn't become louder. She hadn't become bigger. She had become undeniable. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. One message, unknown number, assessment details forthcoming. Be ready. Avery read it once, then she slipped the phone away. Miller approached cautiously, as if still unsure of the rules. Guess this is goodbye. he said. For now, Avery replied. He rubbed the back of his neck. I was wrong about a lot of things. Avery smiled faintly. Most people are, at first. He laughed softly. If you ever really teach, I'd want to learn the right way. Start by listening, Avery said. That's most of it. He nodded. Yeah, that tracks. When he walked away, Avery remained seated, eyes on the horizon. She thought about the gym, the laughter, the silence that followed. She hadn't taken satisfaction from changing their minds. She had taken satisfaction from knowing she hadn't needed to. The sun climbed higher. The grounds emptied. Avery stood, squared her shoulders, and walked back toward the barracks one last time. She paused at the door. Once, this place had felt like a test. Now it felt like a starting point. She stepped inside, gathered her gear, and left without looking back. Somewhere beyond Red Canyon, a door was opening, and Avery Lynn would walk through it the same way she walked onto the mat. Calm, prepared, unmistakable. She didn't need to prove it anymore. She had already become it.